the president of the BA chapter of Singapore Computer Society. And well, thanks for joining and taking the time. We would also like to thank our speakers who volunteered to share their experience during this COVID times. We have speakers from Accenture, from TIBCO Software, and of course, Grab. So if some of you joined our last session, which was about 2 months back, I think we were in a different mind space that time. I mean, we had examples of how we were just trying to survive COVID-19. So there were examples from the health side, from the financial market side in terms of, how are we tracking the economic activity and so on and so forth. But surprisingly and quite refreshingly so, I think the speakers today will share a different perspective. So we're not just talking about surviving the crisis, but it's about how we thrive in it. So instead of being defensive, we're using this as an opportunity to do newer things, basically accelerating the new normal. So that's the topic for today. I mean, we will hear about how in the supply chain side, we are basically using more and more of e-commerce, doing more agile demand planning to serve the needs of clients through e-commerce, and then also stress testing our supply chains through digital twins to make sure that the supply chain and the manufacturing capacity can withstand these external shocks which come from time to time. We'll learn a little bit about how technology is being used to leverage on different data sets, including IoT, to measure life expectancy of people, so that we'll have that example from TIBCO. Then I think something which has become part of our daily lives from the time we wake up, book a taxi, order food, and that is a big part of our daily life. So we also have a speaker from Grab to share how on the transport and delivery side, how data science is helping the company be more nimble and sort of capture the opportunity which COVID presents. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ewan, who is a vice president, to introduce the speakers in a lot more detail, and he will be the MC for this session. So please enjoy the session, and thanks for joining.
Thank you, Manik, and welcome everybody in this call, which is going to be very, very exciting, very, very hot topic these days, which is how to adopt and even accelerate the usage of analytics in this COVID or this post-COVID world. We've got three speakers. The first one is Orkan. Orkan is managing director from Accenture Strategy and Consulting in Singapore. Orkan has almost 20 years of experience working for the leaders in the industry. And Orkan is going to talk about supply chain. And supply chain has been an industry, I would say, disrupted by the pandemic at different levels. There is a need for the supply chain to be reinvented with the closure of the borders or the impact on the travel industry. And of course, there is the booming of the e-commerce activities. So Orkan will explain to us how analytics, AI, machine learning is now at the core of the modern supply chain. After Orkan, we will have Jin Chuan from TIBCO. TIBCO is one of the leaders in the technology space for anything related to analytics. Very, very strong product with all the real-time analytics. And Jin Chuan will talk about the hyper-converged analytics, which is how to leverage the next generation of analytics from a technology perspective on how to apply it to different sets of use cases in the post-COVID world. And at the end, Celine O, which is the head of data science at Grab, will explain to us what Grab needs to do in a different way due to the pandemic. We all know that Grab is one of the most impacted companies or even industries with the COVID. Grab needs to reinvent their business model. They need to reinvent the way they engage with the customers. And of course, once again, big data, analytics, AI is at the core of their new strategy. At the end, we will leave 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes for Q&A. I'm sure everybody in the call will have many interesting questions to ask to our speakers. So we make the effort to keep some time at the end for any questions. You can ask your question on the chat. There is a chat window in Zoom. Feel free to ask any question, and we will ask some of these questions in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the call. I would like Orkan is going to be our first speaker, so I will transition now to Orkan. And Orkan, over to you for your presentation on the supply chain resiliency in the era of COVID-19. Over to you, Orkan.
Perfect. Thank you, Ivan. So I'll start sharing my screen at the same time, and I'll make it full screen. So I have, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and for organizing this session. And thank you for the introduction. I think one thing to add on the introduction is that, so I think I have been fortunate to be working with a lot of supply chain leaders over the last 15, 16, 17 years, especially in the analytics data science field. And I think being part of consulting, being part of this supply chain operations, it has given me some understanding of what are the emerging use cases, what are the emerging solutions that companies are investing or seeing value when it comes to supply chain reinvention. And I think Manik put that very nicely, thriving. Now we are in that thriving, I think, mindset where, yes, we have gone through some hard times, but now we need to turn this into an opportunity. So looking at that, in the next 10 minutes, what I will try to do is to cover two very relevant, recent, and two cases where I'm seeing so many companies are investing. As my employer, Accenture, we are building some capabilities on that. But I think there is this is not because we are building it as a theoretical study, but on the back of a lot of client work, right? So I think two things have happened in the last 3-4 months. One, a lot of companies, and including old school, more traditional brick and mortar type of companies, such as consumer goods, retails, they are, even though they are getting impacted by the supply chain, I think they are seeing much more activity when it comes to e-commerce. And a lot of clients are suddenly trying to figure out this e-commerce thing in a much more effective fashion, right? And as a result of that, this entire e-commerce demand forecasting and pricing capability has become a very hot topic. And a lot of the things that the industry has developed in the last couple of years suddenly becoming very hot. And this is one of the cases that I will be talking about. I think in the first 5 minutes, I'll try to keep it short. And in the second one, more from protection defense perspective, I think companies are considering the supply chain resiliency and risk in a much more tangible and concrete fashion. And I think similar to what we experienced in 2008, 2009 with banks and financial institutions, where governments dictated stress test concept to banks, now many world-leading manufacturing and CPG and other industry companies are investing on supply chain stress testing for their industries. And these are the two things that are getting a lot of attention in the last 3-4 months. And I'll give you a quick representation of some data science techniques and analytical techniques towards these two solutions, right? The first one being the e-commerce demand forecasting, price optimization. I'll show you some statistics that we developed recently specifically in Singapore, but I think it is not a big surprise that the e-commerce activity and digital activity is growing very fast. I will not spend much time on the statistics. This is something we are going through, but I think this dynamics, while COVID has created some dire economic consequences, it enabled, I think, much more focus and attention on the e-commerce channels. That is the driver of this entire price optimization and demand forecasting on the e-commerce channels, right? So what we have is a very interesting use case. And at this time, I'm literally doing like 3 of these very, very similar projects for 3 different industries. One for consumer goods company, one for healthcare company, and one for cosmetics leader, where we are trying to leverage some of these successes from recent research on how to apply an integrated view on demand forecasting and price optimization when it comes to e-commerce. I think what is changing is in our brick and mortar, more traditional environment businesses, these are sequential processes. We do demand forecasting, and then maybe 1-2 weeks later, we do some supply planning. 1 month later, we do inventory planning, and they are very disjointed. But I think the nature of e-commerce is pushing us to make these demand planning, price decision, inventory decisions within even like 15-20 minute time intervals where everything is heavily integrated, right? So this has brought new opportunities for us to introduce machine learning models to do demand forecasting and optimization at the same time, optimization mixed integer programming techniques to decide on the right lever. It may be the price decision, it may be the inventory decision, it may be the campaign promotion decision, literally within 15 minutes, so that I can get the most value out of my e-commerce channel. And in A and B testing environments, we have seen very significant improvements, 15 to 20, 30% improvement in revenue by just doing this combined integrated demand forecasting and price optimization case. And it is supported by our MIT Alliance. There is a very strong theoretical background, but it is also very practical. I'll just try to show you how it works within, again, 2-3 minutes. So it is all about triangulation. At the end of the day, we want to understand our sales, but my sales is a direct implication of my price elasticity, and it is a direct implication of my inventory. And also, as you can see on the picture, the competing products also plays a role. Like these 2 blue, gray, red jackets or the sweaters, they are competing with each other. I am the same one, I'm the same company selling these 3, but they are competing. So the price of one product will influence the conversion rate of the other product. It will influence the sales, and it will influence the stock availabilities. And the solution to that is leveraging AI ML techniques for a set of scenarios around demand planning. Instead of forecasting my demand as an exact number, I try to predict my demand as an input or as an output of different price levels, okay? So what if I sell this for $5? What if I sell it for $10? What if I sell the competing product for $15? When I have all these ranges, a scenario, a portfolio of forecasts, then we put this into an optimization engine, which takes the stock availability as a constraint and takes margin or profitability as my objective function. And in near real time, literally in 15-minute intervals, it tells me the price decision that will give me the best sales, revenue, and stock consumption patterns. And as a result, I use this as a forecasting tool as well as a decision-making tool. So we have designed this traffic prediction, price elasticity, and optimization engines in an integrated fashion that does this old school sales and operations planning in the new environment within, again, like 15-minute brackets, integrating all these 3 levers of my decision, right? And it comes with a pre-built data platform. So this is the initial case that we published with an online retailer that shows us how machine learning will be used to develop a set of forecasts and how optimization will use to decide on what is the right point that I would like to land on. And again, as a result, we are seeing 20 to 30% improvement in revenue, 15-16% improvement in profit, and a significant improvement in my forecast accuracy. So I think it is the new normal. We need to forget about these sequential demand supply planning procedures and move into this real-time integrated demand supply synchronization. Okay, so that was number one. I think I have only a couple of minutes for the next, but I would like to touch on this one as well. So we talk about demand planning. I think another interesting data science capability that is emerging recently is supply chain stress testing idea, which is instead of predicting where the disruption will happen, focus on very, very rarely happening disruptions and bringing an entirely new mathematical model, not to predict the disruption, but to assess the implication of those disruptions to my supply chain in a very fast, smart way. And I'll just put 1 minute on this slide and I will conclude it with that. I think the proprietary technique here is 3 new mathematical KPIs, metrics: the time to recovery, when a node in my supply chain fails, how long it takes to recover; time to survive, when a node fails, how long it takes that it can survive; and finally, a proprietary function that combines the time to recovery to time to survive to assess my risk exposure. And this has been a very recent development in supply chain resiliency and stress testing. And we are seeing in a very fast fashion, a lot of manufacturing companies, automotive companies, CPG companies in the last 6-7 months started implementing this digital twin and stress testing methodology to understand their risk exposure without knowing the exact statistics around the failures in their supply chain. Okay, so I know I'm at the top of my time slot, so I'll just leave with this slide. I think 2 different functions, use cases that are emerging very fast: e-commerce demand forecasting and price optimization in an integrated fashion, and supply chain stress testing using digital twins with new methods in quantifying the risk and the risk exposure of my supply chain. So I'll stop here. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the session. Ivan, back to you.
Thank you, Orkan. Very, very fascinating presentation. And even myself, I've seen it once, your presentation, and I still have a few questions to ask you. So there will be more questions at the end of the call. Thank you, Orkan. Very, very, very interesting. Now, I would like to introduce Jing Shuang to you. Jing Shuang is a regional data scientist for TIBCO. Jing Shuang has been working for a few companies in the financial services industry, like DBS and Aon. And Jing Shuang has been the past 2 years at TIBCO. The key focus of Jing Shuang is data science, and he's working with a few clients in APJ region, so Singapore and the rest of Asia Pac, to understand how some of the leaders in the different industries can apply the latest generation of analytics and big data technologies. Over to you, Jing Shuang.
Thanks for the introduction. Let me share my screen from now. Are you able to see the slides? Let me play the slides.
You can, if you don't mind, go to presentation mode.
Sure.
We can see the comment. You can even go.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Jing Shuang from TIBCO Data Science team. I work for TIBCO and I'm in a global data science team. My daily work is building data science solution to empower TIBCO's customers to connect, unify, and confidently predict with their big data using TIBCO ecosystem, as well as some open source technologies such as Python, R, or Scala. So today I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share with everyone what we are doing as hyperconverged analytics, which means the convergence of technologies as well as different personas to work together for creating end-to-end data science solutions. So to start the presentation of today, we actually realized the analytics spectrum is getting very fruitful, and we have very different things happening together, including the not only the machine learning technologies, but also different requirements such as like streaming capability and different data source, data lake, or data virtualization. So everything are happening together, and we find many different customer requirements, and we find many different technologies that we really need to think about how to put them together and how to make sure they can work well together. So this thing has been identified by the Gartner. It's called like the analytics walls are colliding. So that means some traditional work like the BI roles, they also require the analytics experience. For example, they need to understand how to use some machine learning models to empower the BI work. And they definitely need to understand how to interpret the results from the data science and machine learning models. And also the data is climbing from different places. So with this kind of climbing, that's how we started to think about what we should do, which has been identified as the hyperconverged analytics. So from my opinion, the hyperconverged analytics, they really combine technologies and people together, including the data process management as the very beginning stage. And also, we will require some visual analytics to find the insights and to take the next step actions. And streaming is also a very important piece in this ecosystem, because we find like more and more customers, they want to either they want to make use of some streaming data to do their prediction, or they want to make sure the machine learning models can be used in a real-time engine. So this streaming comes, as I would say, as the third step after we have do some visual analytics. And then, of course, the data science part need to be applied and need to be able, like, retrain the model to keep the model learning. So this high cycle usually forms the end-to-end solution that we work together with our customers to try our best to provide such an ecosystem. So today, I'm going to use one of the projects that our data science team have been working on recently. So a few months back, we started to work on this life expectancy analytics project. We took the data from the World Bank, and then we want to analyze the data, and of course, we want to complete the life cycle to make sure it's the hyperconverged analytics. Okay, so there are three main steps for this analytics. The first one is about the data preparation. So I think I try to break down the, a lot of details into 5 points, although we can do many other more things during the data preparation step. So, but here I can highlight that we always start to understand the data by, building the data access. So the data access, we should try to support many different data sources. Either they're from some streaming environment, or they're from static database, or the database can be some SQL database and also some Hadoop or data lake environment. So the key point is trying to, combine things together and to make sure that data access to every places are reachable. And during the data access process, we can usually build such a pipeline, like you can see in the data canvas. The pipeline should also support us to do the data transformation and allow us to do the some unstacking or replacing, adding new rows, or unpivoting data. So this step can be usually done by the data engineers. They should be the experts to help us to build such a pipeline to make sure the data access is working. And the next step, we start with data exploration. So one way to start with this data exploration is about asking some natural language queries. So this becomes a very important thing that everyone is trying to do now. So for example, when I get the data set about the life expectancy, my question would be like, what are the relationship for the life expectancy that I can try to figure out in the data set? So these natural language queries will try to use some AI-based recommender, and they will show us what are the key relationships that can be quickly identified from the data set. But of course, we should think about like further cleaning the data set before we do more complicated analytics. For example, to imputing the missing values, either we can use some linear or the spline interpolation to try to replace those missing values in the data set. So that can be a very important and standard step to take on as well. And for the feature selection happens after we prepare the data well, and the feature selection will help us to further look into a smaller subset of the variables that can be meaningful and useful for predicting my target column. So here is the life expectancy. And from this feature selection part, we will probably start to using some machine learning models. The easiest way could be like linear regression model, or you can start to use some tree-based model. But the goal is to trying to find some statistical significance for different variables. Then it can help us to determine what are the variables that we want to use for the next step. And from this project, we definitely find some very good predictors. For example, the percentage of people got HIV positive in the population. That is a very good indicator for predicting the life expectancy from different countries. So after we have done this kind of feature selection, we will get a more beautiful subset, cleaned data. Then we can, the analysts can start to build some simple visualization. And yeah, more or less we have done for the data preparation as the first part. So this first part can be, usually it can be done by some data analysts. So they don't really need to understand too complicated machine learning models. So they can just use some BI tools or use some visualization tools to build this, to do this kind of data preparation. Then for the next part is about modeling. Imagine that we have already cleaned up the data and now we should try to apply more complicated machine learning models for different purpose. I also break the modeling part into 3 main steps. The first one, of course, is about model training. When we do the model training, of course, we will need to, maybe we will need to add more features, or we need to use some other ways to reduce the dimension, or we should handle the problem of unbalanced data set. And yeah, so this visual, okay, you can see this is another visual analytics pipeline. So inside this visual analytics pipeline, you can of course notice that it's not like we just import the data, then we apply the machine learning models. But of course, we need to do some other ETL or do some other feature engineering work before we apply the machine learning models. So after that, we can just, usually we start with some most commonly used machine learning models, for example, the decision tree, or those like logistic regression. Or if you want to try, you can try the neural network, but that really depends on your business requirements. But another thing I can highlight that our typical data science team is also trying to bring this AutoML, auto machine learning capability to our customers, because we understand that not all the users from our customer side, they know machine learning so well. That's why we try to build this AutoML for them to get started with. So they just need to simply apply some AutoML function, then they will receive something like a leaderboard. The leaderboard will show what are the best, what are the recommended machine learning algorithm they can try on, and what are some strategies they can apply to prepare their data sets better. So these are the model training part that we usually how we usually help our customers. Then the next part is about the model evaluation. This could be very important, but also very standard. I just want to highlight that apart from the model performance, for example, the accuracy F1 score, I also realized that the model training time, or the time that it takes for a model to predict on the new data, so those time is another very important metrics for customers to look into at, because you can imagine that if they are building some models for a real-time environment, then the neural network model will probably take very long to train, and even take a certain longer time to predict the values. So we probably need to use some other more elegant or more simplified model, so not like the deep learning model, to help them to make sure the model can be used in a real-time system. So that is really about looking into the model running time. So that is as important as looking into the model accuracy from my perspective. Yeah. And yeah, of course, a lot of times I will receive the requirements from the customers that they say they want to try some new open source technologies. Probably it's the package in Python, or it's the package in Scala, the Spark framework. And as the data scientist, I should also keep it open. So for example, sometimes we need to write some Python script in our platform. Then we try to integrate this. Then we can integrate this Python script to the visual analytics workflow to make sure the customers can always use the new technologies or the new machine learning package as they wish. All right. Okay. So the last part about the life cycle is about the deployment. The first thing about the deployment is a very critical problem of how to retrain the model when we get more new data set. So usually our solution will be, we will allow the users to schedule some jobs, and this scheduling could happen either on demand, or it can happen on some scheduling base, for example, every week. So this can make sure our customers can always get the the new models when we get more new data set, either the data set coming from the streaming environment, or the data set are just inserted by the users. But the model will be kept updating for every week. And the second thing is about where to deploy the model. We provide some scoring engines for the customers. You can imagine that you use some workflow to train your models. Then this model can be exported as some individual files. So if you're a Python programmer, you must know how to save a model to PMML. That's how we can usually get the output from the workflow and use this model, deploy the model to a scoring engines. And this scoring engine will make sure the model has been exposed as API service. Then of course, they can send the API request to get some real-time scoring. And the model management is another important part of deployment lifecycle, because for some, I would say for the real project, we would probably have more than one models. And either we should think about which model should be the best model that we should use for now, or we should think about probably we have different group of data or group of users that we should apply different models to different group of users. Then we definitely need some portal or places to manage different models to make sure we are using the best and the appropriate models. And last but not least, all the capability from the deployment environment should be connected to the end user's application. So look back to the visualization dashboard here. So you can notice the difference will be, if you can see clearly, the difference will be on the left side of this screenshot, you will notice we have applied 4 different machine learning algorithms, and those machine learning algorithms are trying to tell us the prediction of the life expectancy. And those machine learning algorithms are either from the visual analytics workflow, or they are from some Python scripts to empower them to compare different predictions and to help them to make a better decision. So this is how we really help to converge everything together, including the the beginning part of how to understand the data, and the middle part of how to train appropriate machine learning model, and the last part how to deploy build a deploying environment for everyone, including the analyst, data engineer, data scientists, to make use of the results. And that's how we usually keep this as our business goal, which is trying to build the intelligent apps. And from this part, you can clearly see that the life expectancy is just a demo that I picked to elaborate what are the process that we usually needed to work through. But here you can see we have done this kind of hyperconverged analytics for a lot of industries. So more than analyzing the healthcare data, and yeah, as also we are also trying to do the digital twin, as mentioned by the previous speaker. And here are just some other the brief description of the other projects that I have been working on recently. So for example, using time series data to analyze the patterns for the energy consumption customer is a very, interesting project for me as well, because time series data are happening, for almost all the industries for now, not only for the high-tech manufacturing, but also for the energy and the financial industries. So this project, we try to apply some clustering analytics to help them to identify different group of users, and different group users would have very different patterns of how they're using the electricity. And then you will notice some groups, they might be the household, and the other group should be the shopping malls in the CBD, and the other group can be the, the nightclub. And also we can identify some anomaly groups from this kind of clustering analysis. And the next one is about, pattern recognition in Waiver maps. This is another very common topics from the high-tech manufacturing industries. What we really need to do is how to map the real world and the virtual world together, just like what we have done with the digital twins. So we try to make sure the streaming data from the sensors are correctly imported and analyzed by some machine learning models. Then we can identify what are the dangerous signals that some waivers could go into problems. Then we can take actions in advance. And last but not least, since COVID-19 happened this year, our data science team has done some work for the COVID-19. This is one of the examples. We want to understand what is the risk for business to reopen. Then we need to use some geolocation data and also some different indicators to build the models. And in the end, we need to bring this visual analytics dashboard for the users to allow them, click on different buttons, apply different filters to get the insights they are really interested in. Okay, so the key takeaways for my presentation are 3 points. The first one, this kind of converging is happening, and we need to realize the strong and productive collaboration is really required. And the second one is the hyperconverged analytics are happening for various industries, so not just for one industry or two. And last but not least, our typical data science team are trying to bring the AI capability to help to drive this convergence. Okay, so that's my presentation of this webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. And same thing. We will come back to you in 10 to 15 minutes for more questions.
Yeah.
And I want to let everybody know in the call that they can type some questions on the chat.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice the question.
Yes, there is no question yet, but anyone should be able to ask question.
Okay.
Last topic, last speaker, last but not least, I would say, we've got Serene. Serene O, which is she's the head of data science at Grab. And of course, I think we all know that Grab has been impacted by the pandemic. And when you think about the most impacted companies in Singapore, everybody will think about Singapore Airlines, about Changi Airport, and Grab for sure will be in the top 5. That's why I think everybody is very, very keen to understand how Grab can leverage data or data science to adjust or reinvent their strategy in this post-COVID world. So Serene, over to you. I'm very impatient to see your presentation because I think this is a very, very hot topic for all of us. So over to you, Serene.
All right, great. Thanks so much for the introduction. Can everyone see my slides and also hear me well?
Yes,
okay. Great. Okay, so yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Serene, and I lead the data science teams in Grab for transport, marketplace, and experiences. So pleasure to be with everyone here today. So today I would just like to share with you all kind of a simple presentation, right, about adapting to the new normal, but this time from a Grab and Grab data science perspective. So, you know, the fact that we're actually holding this on Zoom is really an example of how much COVID-19 has really changed the way we live and we work. In particular, in Southeast Asia, where Grab operates, as I think, you know, I think everyone has been impacted, right? So millions of lives and livelihoods have been impacted across Southeast Asia. So I guess, you know, from a data-driven approach, right? Let me first share with you some data from Southeast Asia under COVID-19. So these snapshots are derived off data from our driver GPS pings. And basically, what it shows, the red lines, what it shows you is actually peak hour traffic congestion, right? Derived from that in Singapore. So this was actually in January this year. And this actually shows what happened after circuit breaker kicked in April. So you can see overnight, I think the crowds just disappeared from the roads in Singapore. And likewise, this is Jakarta. I think everyone may know that Jakarta has very congested roads. So this is how it looked like in January. And then what happened in April. So as you can see, I think it's very visual here. I think for the first time in years, and probably more than a decade, right, roads have cleared across some of the most congested cities in the world. And that is just a small glimpse of how much impact COVID has had in cities in Southeast Asia. So as the crisis unfolded, I think there's several trends that emerged that kind of made it clear to us the role Grab had to play as a business to serve the community. And some of this was captured in Grab's social impact report, but I'll just share with you some quick takeaways. So firstly, I think the pandemic has shown us that gig work is critical. Deliveries became a new essential service as people relied on online platforms to order food, groceries, and other essential items. And as the demand for deliveries went up, people who lost income during COVID moved to new opportunities to continue earning a living. So between March and April earlier this year, I think we saw more than 100,000 people who joined Grab as drivers and delivery partners during the crisis to sustain themselves. And of course, as you can imagine, with COVID, our transport business really took a big hit, and our driver partners also saw the ride demand drop. But thankfully, we were able to shift over almost 150,000 of them to deliveries so that they could continue to earn an income. So our delivery partners really played a very important role as essentially frontliners, right? They were delivering essential services while cities were under lockdown. So in this period, we also saw digitalization becoming a very urgent priority. The businesses that have an online presence, they have a lifeline to continue earning some form of revenue, right? But many of them don't. So I think small and traditional businesses like hawkers, wet markets, or those small grocery stores or mom and pop shops are really the backbone of economies across much of Southeast Asia. And obviously they've been hit hard by the pandemic. So between March and April this year, we onboarded almost close to 80,000 new merchant partners to the Grab platform. And we also were able to accelerate the expansion of GrabMart across all 8 countries. So with GrabMart, we're able to bring on board new types of merchant partners like pharmacies, florists, and small grocery stores. And during this period, our merchant partners also were able to see about a 21% increase in online revenue through the Grab platform. And of course, point 3, safety and hygiene is now a very high priority for obvious reasons. Things like contactless deliveries, temperature screenings, cashless payments, hygiene protocols. Those are some of the interventions put in place. And Grab also proactively suspended our Grab Share ride-sharing service in all countries because of social distancing kind of reasons. And finally, I think global crises such as COVID, it really demands a whole of society response. So we're able to tap on Grab's reach and technology to extend support to help ease the burden on healthcare systems through things like helping with contact tracing, aiding in COVID-19 testing, and launching services like Grab Response, which is essentially a dedicated non-emergency transport service to ferry those individuals who are more stable and clinically well to hospitals, for example, those who are on stay-home notice. So we have also leveraged our delivery network to help to distribute government aid to driver partners and also to underprivileged households. So this is how the Grab app looks like now, if you have seen it recently. So you can see the influence of elements related to COVID prevention and the dissemination of official information. For example, you can see on the top, the Trace Together app, right, that was promoted by the Singapore government. So the new normal. So what really characterizes the new normal? First of all, I think social distancing as the norm, right, even as the economies reopen. So I think the heightened awareness around hygiene will likely be one of the most permanent change that arises. I think we have seen this before. I think during the SARS situation about 20 years ago, I believe, like Hong Kong, Korea, Taiwan, I think they have adapted their healthcare systems to be more pandemic ready. And then user behavior as well, like things like mask wearing, when sick, frequent hand washing, really become ingrained in the population. There will also be permanent changes in consumer behavior. I think consumers are very likely to remain very cautious about venturing out, even after the lockdowns, because everyone's worried, of a second wave of infection. And when they actually do venture out, I think most people will seek to reduce their risk of exposure. So things like they might likely prioritize F&B outlets that have more stringent hygiene standards, and then they may also opt for modes of transport that are lower risk. The next aspect is also about work from home, right? That's no longer a trend. I think most of us are doing that now. In fact, it's becoming a very structured and encouraged practice, with many companies envisioning more of their workforce working from home permanently. So what this means is that people will likely continue to rely on digital channels to consume services, for entertainment and for work. And the demand for such digital services and as well as deliveries will remain high. So what this means is that businesses must digitalize to survive. So we've covered the elements of this new normal that we are in, but really what does this all mean from a data practitioner standpoint, right? How should we change the way we think and we work? So let me just share a few key learnings as a data practitioner in Grab. So I'll summarize it into 3 points: to reassess, to learn, and to adapt. So what do I mean here? So number 1, to reassess. A lot of data science and machine learning rely heavily on historical trends and patterns. So in a black swan situation like COVID, right, previous trends don't always apply. there really needs to be a thorough reassessment and re-evaluation of our assumptions and approaches for existing models or product features, and to look out for new observations and insights. So this is a very simple example, right? I think an observation during COVID time was unusually high cancellation rates for certain areas. So on closer examination, this was the reason. So some drivers were afraid of picking or dropping off passengers at hospitals or medical facilities due to their fear of contracting the virus. So this, although it's very unfortunate, thankfully new trends, even if unfortunate, they sometimes also inspire innovation. So Grab quickly put together a new vertical called Grab Care, which is essentially a dedicated ride service for healthcare professionals. So drivers have to sign up to participate, and hence we mitigate the risk of cancellations, giving our well-deserved healthcare professionals a good experience in getting to work and to and from work. So the second aspect is to learn, right? So I think with very large changes and potentially permanent changes, right, in consumer behavior, we need to relearn and to understand, again, our customer within this new normal. And we can do this through insights from data. So let me share just some changes in customer behavior before and after, right, captured in this slide. So first of all, travel patterns, right? Rides to and from the airport used to be, a large part, a mainstay of Grab trips. But with limited travel overseas, and this is no longer the case. And then travel from home to work and work to home has also reduced with more people working from home. Things like food order trends. So trends such as delivery location, as well as order frequency and basket size have also shifted, with more people staying home to mitigate the COVID risk. And finally, from the aspect of customer intent, so we have also seen a shift in, for example, transport customers now interacting on our app for delivery. And behavior changes are also very noticeable via things like customer feedback, right, where things like safety and hygiene become concerns. So I guess the question is, with changes caused by COVID, how does it affect our customers' propensity and the method they interact and transact with our business? And having a much better understanding would help us also to design appropriate new features and products to suit our customers. And finally, adapt. So we really need to, right? Change is a new constant here. So I think, as everyone expects, I think the journey to recovery will be a long one with many fluctuations. Right? We're already seeing many countries, for example, like Philippines, Indonesia, get hit by new sets of COVID infections after easing lockdowns. Some may have another lockdown, some may not. And it's really difficult to predict when the cycle will really end. So I think we're kind of expecting to be in for a long period of flux, right? Fluctuations in multiple aspects, in government restrictions and regulations, in customer behavior, in market dynamics. And what does this mean now from a data science perspective? Right? I think Grab has hundreds of models in production. What do we need to take care of? So first of all, robust model retraining pipelines. So we have to make sure to recheck certain assumptions we made when we built the models and features to ensure that they're still relevant after we are so-called back to ground zero, right? So that nothing breaks. So for example, after a period of full lockdown, if we have features that describe things like perhaps new users or returning users, essentially it might be the case that all passengers and drivers would suddenly become new users, right? Which would be impossible in a normal scenario, but which is now possible. So we need to ensure things like that, such features are handled properly in our code. The second aspect is regarding adaptive models. So our models must be adapting to changes in behavior. So of course, this is a given, but now with maybe slightly different considerations, right? We need to think about, are we retraining at sufficiently frequent intervals to reflect how frequently market dynamics and user behavior changes now? Things like models that were trained on ad hoc basis, we need to relook at and potentially automate, shorten training intervals for others, and ensure continuous monitoring of model accuracy with the relevant triggers for automated model retraining. So we also are moving more and more towards online learning to allow models to be even more adaptive to changes in behavior. And lastly, we started investing a lot more into levers and automation. As a data science team, we need to provide accessible ways for our product and country teams to turn on and off models and features, adjust feature weights and constraints so that they can also quickly adapt to new and changing restrictions and regulations across all our different cities and markets. We also need to automate some of these decision aids to help them more quickly adapt to these changing market dynamics. So on that note, I would like to wrap up by saying that COVID is probably, the biggest crisis of our generation, and we really don't know when we'll see the end. There are probably a lot more unintended consequences that we don't yet understand. So I think fighting this pandemic, I think for all of us, will be on many fronts. Apart from immediate health concerns, things like how do we adapt our business, how do we relook and adapt the way that we have been using data, and how do we use tech to serve the common good? These are questions that we can ask ourselves, right? So maybe all continue to find ways to use data and technology to help address challenges as we emerge from this crisis. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Serene. Once again, fantastic presentation. And I think we've got 5 minutes left for questions. Actually, if you don't mind, I will ask you the first question myself. Serene, when you explain that Grab needs to adapt to the new normal, from a data science perspective, what does it mean? Does it mean that you need to generate new insight from the existing data? Or does it mean that you need to look at additional or new data sources? Or does it mean that you need to analyze the data in a new way, in a different way? So what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the head, right? I think it's all of these things. I think one of the big part of it that I mentioned is that I think we need to also look at what's already running production, right? And just to make sure that those models are able to adapt appropriately, and there's nothing that we are overlooking because of the way certain situations have changed. So I think that's one of the big things. But in addition, I think we really need to understand, should we be looking in a slightly different area, right? For some of the insights that we never used to look at. Certain so-called features may suddenly become important. Things that we didn't really care about before because it's not part of the hypothesis, right? It doesn't really affect user behavior. Some of these things become a lot more important now. Things like safety factors, hygiene factors. So I think these are some of the things that we need to kind of think through and relook at. Yeah.
Okay, very, very, very interesting. I wanted to ask Jing Xuan as well. From a TIBCO perspective, which demand do you see from your clients in terms of technology? Are they looking for more, real-time analytics, looking for more tools to do machine learning, or more tools to do data integration? Where do you see the most demand from your clients?
I think the 2 things you asked, they are both the real things our customers are asking for. For the real-time analytics, we are facing more and more discussion about that. Like, then for different technologies, then of course different customers would have different environments. They have their different data sets, different ways of processing the time, and different real-time engines they are using. So the problem for us is how to support integrating those things together with our TIBCO solution. Yeah.
Okay, very clear. Orkan, if you're still there, I've got a question for you as well. When you talk about supply chain, supply chain needs to be reinvented with data and data science as a core of supply chain. What do you think is the position of Singapore compared to the rest of the world? Do you think Singapore and Asia are at the forefront of innovation, or do you think we are behind what the US and Europe are doing? Orkan, what is your view?
Yeah, I think even on that one, and I think our industry minister has shared some interesting statistics a couple months ago. I think we are already seeing more and more companies coming into Singapore to run their supply chains, and this has been accelerated during COVID, but it has already been happening. Companies establishing operations and managing operations from here, and there are a few reasons for that. One, of course, the hub nature, even though the flights are very well impacted, having a very strong port, having a very strong land transportation, and having a very strong airport, both for cargo and passenger, is a very critical part of becoming a hub for supply chain. Okay, I think the other piece is the entire skill set, the people skills. So supply chain is a very like a high discipline, almost like an army kind of an environment. Okay, and I think Singapore has an edge when you look into maybe other parts of Southeast Asia. Singapore has that the tendency to be much more disciplined, to be much more organized, to be much more process driven, and those capabilities definitely help. And combining that with the technology know-how, the data science know-how, computer science know-how, I think this makes Singapore a very interesting, very appealing location for managing supply chains. Having said that, I think comparing to US is maybe a little bit aggressive, but I think beyond US, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, Singapore will continue becoming a hub for decision-making for supply chains and running the supply chains, if not for global, for the Asia-Pacific region.
Okay, thank you, Orkan. I would like to open the floor to questions, if you don't mind, because we only have 5 minutes left. I think there is a first question that I can see on the chat window.
So related to the chat window, I think there's also a Q&A window, and I think a couple of us, we have been answering a few questions there as well.
Okay, good, good. Yes, I couldn't see it. Yes, and I think there are a few open questions, including for you, Lynn. One question I wanted to ask to Serene as well, because I know, Serene, you need to drop in a couple of minutes. Are you trying, or do you need to increase the number of data scientists at Grab at the moment to be able to find some new patterns in the data? Can we say that with COVID, data science is becoming even more central in the business model of Grab? Is it something that we can say?
Yeah, I think in general, I think data and data science is very central in Grab. I think we have embedded data science models in almost every part of the customer journey, right? And in our app. So definitely, yes. I think the aspect, of course, of resourcing is also a question of priorities, right? So I think we might have a long list of backlog of items that we want to do. But with the same resource, we can just fulfill the top priority ones. So definitely, I think data is very important. I think there's always a lot to do. I think with or without COVID, a lot more that we can improve on for existing models as well. So yeah, so I think for us, I think we're just aggressively prioritizing which items to pick up just to, cover that. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's what I can see as well from an Accenture perspective. That with COVID, the need for data and data science is even stronger. And data becomes a part of the core business of most of our clients. Jingchuan, one last question for you. Do you think COVID is helping the adoption of the cloud for your clients? Do you see them moving more and more to the cloud to be able to address the COVID situation faster and better?
I think moving to cloud has been a trend since years ago. Okay. Then I'm facing a lot of discussion even before the COVID-19. So maybe I would say after the COVID-19 happened, customers would prefer like making things more digitalized. So they would, think of how to work together, collaborate together in a centralized place or on some cloud platform. So that might be true for the new trend after the COVID. Yeah.
Okay, very clear. Last question for you, Orkan. Before we wrap up, Orkan, we've got lots of people attending the call, and we also have some junior people which are going to graduate and enter the work market in the coming months. What would be your advice, Orkan, to the new data scientists, the new data engineers starting their career in this post-COVID world? Which advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so I think I will look at it from my perspective or my preferences. I mean, different people, different backgrounds would have different preferences. But I think when I approach the data science and the technical fields, what I value a lot is the merger of technical data science skills with the functional know-how, either a functional or industry know-how. It may be supply chain, it may be consumer insight, it may be cyber security, or it may be finance. But I personally, I have always seen a lot of value in, when I was shaping my career or my development, in combining this technical know-how, data science, with the functional supply chain capability. And I think this is, if it is not the way, it is one of the most effective ways to develop a long-lasting career and to be much more embedded into the core of a business decision-making, rather than just becoming a technical person behind the scenes. So I think that is my top recommendation when youngsters are shaping their careers.
Thank you, Orkan. I would mostly echo what you just said. I think the key recommendation from my side for all the new people is to be adaptive. Adapt yourself to the change of the economy, of the business, and the data, of course. I think I need to wrap up, and I will transition to Camilla. Camilla, I think you've got a final slide to show, I think. And before we wrap up, I want to say a big thank you to Orkan, to Jingshuan, to Serene.
Oh,
because it was very interesting. So
thanks for having me as well. Yeah.